Hello, everybody. Apologies for the pretty crappy video and audio. I am recording at home. I've ordered myself a better setup, so in the future this is all going to be a little bit better. Stay with the world today. I just didn't feel like going into the office on a Sunday, so apologies. Here we go. The United States of America has bombed the nation of Iran. At approximately 2:30 in the morning local time in the mid-evening hours in Washington, D.C., a group of B-2 stealth bombers and nuclear submarines carried out airstrikes against 3 facilities that are critical to the nuclear program of the Islamic Republic of Iran. According to the United States, those sites now lay in ruin. According to Iran, retaliation is on the way. Here's what you need to know about what happened, why the United States has become involved in the way that it did, and what comes next. The attack. Alright, so before we get into the details of all of this stuff, we've got to be clear about the timing. Everything that we discuss in this episode is accurate as of the best of our ability. You can see me at home trying to get it out as quickly as possible. As the mid-morning hours of June the 22nd, 2025, local time in Tehran and Jerusalem. Of course, we're going to make this episode as quickly as possible, but this is a rapidly evolving situation, and anything that has happened since that time is not going to be discussed here. We do intend to provide further report as the crisis continues, so rest assured that we'll be back to discuss major changes where we can. With that settled, let's get into it. Also, huge shout out to Evan, who worked through the early hours of Sunday morning to get this done. Shout out to Morris, who helped coordinate it. Shout out to Jen, who's about to edit it. And shout out to me, because it's Sunday morning. If you want to subscribe, if you want to super chat, it is of course always appreciated. Now, as we said at the top today, the United States carried out its airstrikes against Iran in the middle of the night on Sunday, when America's B-2 bombers would have been no more visible to the naked eye than they would have been to Iranian air defenses. Those bombers were launched under a veil of secrecy some hours earlier, set to attack in clandestine fashion as a separate group of B-2s embarked on a highly visible journey from the US across the Pacific Ocean. The bombers that were traveling from the United States flew with their transponders on, meaning that their movements could be easily tracked by global open-source intelligence and other governments, meaning that as of now it appears that they were meant to serve as a diversion. The real attack was directed toward 3 Iranian nuclear facilities, including 2 nuclear enrichment centers at Natanz and Fordo, respectively, and Isfahan uranium conversion facility, where powdered yellowcake uranium is converted into a form that can be used for enrichment. Buried deep underground, the enrichment facility at Fordo appears to have been the main target for the B-2s, which unleashed the combined power of 6 of America's most powerful bunker-buster munitions. Now, those bombs, known as massive ordnance penetrators, weigh 30,000 pounds in total and have a 5,000-pound warhead. They are designed to burrow deep through reinforced concrete in order to expose and destroy some of the most hardened bunkers in the world. With 6 of the massive ordnance penetrators used in the strike, at least 3 B-2s participated. The bomber is the only aircraft that can currently carry those bombs, which only the United States possesses, and each bomber can carry 2 in its internal weapons base. Elsewhere near Iran, American submarines surfaced at a distance stated by news outlets to have been about 400 miles away from their targets, the Natanz and Isfahan facilities. Those submarines launched 30 subsonic cruise missiles known as the Tomahawk, each of which can carry a conventional explosive of up to 1,000 pounds. They're also able to carry nuclear warheads, but in this case, they clearly didn't. At the time of writing, it appears that the strikes on the 3 nuclear facilities were the extent of America's attack, with President Donald Trump confirming as much in an address to the nation. During that address, Trump made a few key claims. First and foremost, that the United States had, quote, completely and totally obliterated its targets. Second, Trump indicated, at least for the time being, this was the extent of the military action that the United States would take against Iran, in hopes that Iran would immediately engage in peace negotiations to end the ongoing conflict. And third, Trump threatened that if Iran doesn't negotiate a peace, or if it chooses to retaliate, the United States can and will engage in follow-up strikes. And as of the time of writing, no follow-up strikes have yet occurred. What we can learn. Alright, for the sake of our own production turnaround here at WarFronts, we're gonna leave discussion of the political implications of America's decision for another day. Instead, we're going to focus directly on the strikes themselves, their impacts, and what we can glean about what went down and why. The first thing to consider is America's prior signaling several days ago that Washington would wait to carry out a strike, considering options for 2 weeks before making a decision. In retrospect, that appears to have been little more than a charade, although notably it does repeat the same elements of misdirection that allowed Israel to catch Iran by surprise with its first wave of strikes. Then, as now, Iran's opponents have sent clear signs and signals that they don't believe themselves to be ready to attack. Before, then, attacking, basically, immediately. Now that, however, combines with reporting that the United States contacted Iran hours before the strike took place, notifying Tehran as well as Jerusalem about the strikes that were about to unfold. According to some American officials, quoted anonymously by the global press, Iran was able to evacuate the targeted facilities before the strike took place, although considering how badly diminished Iran's air defenses are at this stage, it's unlikely that stealth bombers flying under the cover of darkness could have been stopped, even with advance warning for Iran. Regarding the bomber attacks at the Fordo facility, the use of so many bunker-buster bombs suggests that there may have been some truth in prior concerns about bombs' ability to break through. The really important parts of the Fordo installation are believed to be several hundred meters underground, carefully insulated against aerial attack, and although America's massive ordnance penetrator is the premier conventional bunker buster in any Western arsenal, there are still limits to how far a single bomb can go. As a result, defense experts have suggested that early bombs might have to borrow part of the distance, blow open as much of the target as they can, and clear the way for successive bombs to burrow deeper and deeper, all with the help of precision guiding technology. These are weapons that Israel doesn't have and couldn't obtain. They had to be delivered by way of the US. As for whether or not these tactics were successful, it's difficult to say. Predictably, the United States has claimed complete destruction, while Iran has claimed that most of the damage was surface level. But it's too early for either side to have completed a thorough damage assessment. While either claim could technically be true, it's also entirely possible that if Fordo centrifuges survived, they're inaccessible due to tunnel collapses in the installation. Regarding the other two sites that were hit, the US has again claimed to have destroyed its targets, and that may be true in the case of the Natanz facility. But the facility at Isfahan is deep underground, where Tomahawk missiles alone are unlikely to have broken through completely. Some conflicting reports suggest that America's bunker busters were also used at those sites, although the truth isn't yet clear at the time of writing. It's also not clear whether Iran was able to move any of its enriched uranium or its centrifuge components in the event that the reports of Iran being notified in advance were accurate. Now, if those three facilities have been destroyed, then the main implication would be that Iran's ability to produce new enriched uranium is disrupted for the long term. Unless Iran has other unknown enrichment facilities elsewhere, which isn't likely considering the apparent depth of penetration of Israeli intelligence across Iran's military apparatus, Iran now lacks the ability to enrich its existing uranium to weapons grade or to provide new uranium in a state suitable for enrichment. That disruption, plus an Israeli strike on a heavy water reactor that could have been used to make plutonium when it eventually came online, would indicate that Iran's supply chain for weapons-grade material has been cut off at several points in ways that will be very difficult for Iran to undo. Just as important as understanding what's happened is understanding what comes next. The reason that the prospect of American strikes on Iran has gotten so much media coverage in the lead-up isn't simply because the world hungers for a display of American military might, but because for the world's premier superpower to get involved in this conflict directly opens up a wide range of possibilities on where this conflict could go, and very few of those possibilities are good. Based on the publicly expressed goals of America's leaders, a best-case outcome for Washington would be one where Iran re-engages in peace talks and ultimately agrees to America's terms for a deal. That, however, doesn't seem entirely likely to happen. Iran's command and control structure has been in disarray, with leadership issues getting in the way of the prior attempt to negotiate a peace, and what the world has heard from Iran's leaders has not been encouraging. According to Iran, reprisals will be coming, and all American troops and other citizens in the Middle East will be viewed as acceptable targets. The United States and Israel both anticipate major retaliatory strikes and are taking precautions at the time of writing, with early reports indicating that 2 waves of missiles have already scored hits in several locations. As for what that retaliation will look like, it's assets located in the Middle East that are at greatest risk. At this stage in the war, Iran appears to lack the offensive capabilities that would enable a defeat of Israel. But not being able to defeat Israel isn't the same as not being able to hurt Israel, and Iran does appear capable of doing the latter. According to Israeli defense sources, the country's stocks of available interceptors are running low. Iran has recent experience coordinating large-scale missile and drone strikes that can overwhelm those air defenses for a short period of time. While Iran has lost some of its missile launch capabilities, it's still been able to launch missiles in significant numbers, and it may have been able to hold some capabilities in reserve. When those hard-hitting ballistic missiles are combined with the masses of hundreds or even thousands of kamikaze drones in waves Iran hasn't yet unleashed, they still have the ability to deliver real damage to Israel, even if Israel is all but guaranteed to endure and strike back in kind. The same calculus holds basically true for American assets in the region, at least in broad strokes. As for an attack on the American homeland, that's a bit less likely. It's not inconceivable that Iran could have snuck drones or small units of personnel onto American soil, but even though a successful attack of that size would come with major psychological effects for the US, the impact on America's warfighting ability would be negligible. Beyond an immediate retaliation, Iran could also expand its response in a few different ways. One option would be to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which is critical for worldwide shipping and would lead to global economic fallout. Iran could do that with an official announcement of a blockade, hoping other nations respond, or it could strike maritime shipping traffic outright using drones or missiles similar to the Houthi rebels in Yemen. And speaking of the Houthis, Iran's proxy allies across the Middle East have threatened a direct response if the US gets involved, including the Houthis, Hezbollah, and a major militia group called Kataib Hezbollah. While the latter two groups may or may not choose to act on their pledge, some degree of participation from the Houthis should be expected, perhaps restarting their own long-range campaign against Red Sea shipping. As for why Iran would choose to retaliate rather than coming back to the negotiating table, the nation's leaders may feel that they're in a position to pick their poison rather than assuming that their regime will survive. Ayatollah Khamenei has reportedly chosen several potential successors and has been rapidly deputizing new military leaders as the old ones were wiped out. Khamenei, who by some reports is still sick with cancer, appears to be well aware that he might not survive this conflict, and even if he does, peace with Israel would come with its own problems. Iran's regime is known to be in a rough spot, bitterly opposed by much of the public who would like to see their nation reformed, but a truce with Israel, especially if Iran doesn't retaliate after taking heavy losses, would likely outrage the hardliners that the regime depends on for its survival. So, from the perspective of the Iranian regime, is the least worst option to stand aside, let Israel win, or is the least worst option to begin a retaliatory cycle and see whether some off-ramp might emerge where the regime can save a bit of face? As we end today's episode and turn our attention toward what comes next, it's worth taking a moment to answer one final question. Is this World War III? Now, privately, we're WarFronts have made a habit of knocking on all the available wood before we consider big questions like this, so please join us in doing that. But no, this isn't World War III, at least not for now. At this stage, the crisis in the Middle East is still several orders of magnitude short of a world war, and the warning signs that this could metastasize into that sort of conflict are just not popping up yet. Although it can hurt Israel and the United States in the short term, Iran just doesn't have the military resources to wage a protracted war by itself. And while its proxy forces may get involved in the conflict, there are currently no indicators that a more powerful nation would enter the conflict on Iran's side. China simply doesn't care that much. Russia's in no position to open up a second and much larger front than it's working with in Ukraine. Pakistan and India are far too focused on each other, and there's not really anybody else to account for. However this plays out, it's not World War III, and again, it's not going to be. What it is one of the defining crises of the 21st century thus far, and as the situation evolves further, we'll be back here to cover it. So stay safe, stay aware. Thank you for watching. I'm going back to my Sunday.